Jeremy Rosenthal. Jeremy, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now.
Thank you, Christina. How are you?
I'm great. So this story, of course, it's been one that we've been following since it happened back in December, that manhunt that ensued in the days after for the capture of Luigi Mangione. But now the newest details, of course, he was expected to be in court today, but we also got some new details last night. Now he has facing new federal charges as well. Can you sort of explain these new federal charges and how they're going to differ from the states?
The most significant difference is going to be that the Department of Justice is going to seek the death penalty against Mr. Mangione. That's a really big uptick from what New York State was planning to do. In order to get a death sentence in federal court, you've got to prove, obviously, an intentional homicide. You've got to prove what's called an aggravating factor. In this instance, they're going to point to this being what they're characterizing as an act of terror, that being trying to shake an industry-wide, trying to generate fear industry-wide in the insurance industry and to sort of rally support, if you will, against public figures like Brian Thompson. It's a tall task. It's a tall order anytime you're trying to invoke the death penalty. You don't have it on every case, and very, very few murders even result in capital punishment. But the Department of Justice, Attorney General Pam Bondi made it very clear that they thought it was in the best interest of the United States that Mr. Mangione be sentenced to death, and they're going to be pursuing that.
And it is certainly interesting because if I'm not mistaken, Jeremy, does New York State even have the ability to do capital punishment in their state?
That's a good question. They're certainly not pursuing it in this instance. And in this instance, most situations where you're going to have a homicide, federal murder charges are actually, believe it or not, kind of on the rare side. You have state courts most commonly prosecute these types of offenses. And in the majority of these types of situations, the feds are going to lay back and let the states sort of take the lead. And in this instance, New York State may very well take the lead on it. Their trial may go first. But again, they're not seeking the death penalty. New York State elevated Mr. Mangione's case to the highest degree of murder that they can, based on the same prerequisite, based on the terror charge. Again, saying, look, you are trying to invoke a panic or a fear industry-wide or across the board, and we believe that puts this murder in a different category. I think in some instances the death penalty is. I'll leave it obviously to the jury or the judge who's deciding the case whether or not it's appropriate. But Mr. Mangione has, I think, a lot of mitigating factors here, even for what was obviously an obvious cold-blooded killing. Mr. Mangione suffered from some psychological issues, whether they rise to the level of not guilty by reason of insanity or not, if that's how his defense team seeks to go about it. But this is a man who 6 months before the murder, the family says, we don't recognize him anymore. He was off the grid. This is an age commonly where young men might have a break, a psychological break, sometimes with reality. So anytime you have these types of mitigating factors, the death penalty really becomes less and less likely the more a jury or a judge is exposed to those types of things. But again, they're taking a very aggressive approach to it.
And Jeremy, I think what also makes this case so interesting, it was a 5-day manhunt in the days after the murder of the CEO to capture who police believe killed him, Luigi Mangione, the man they now have in custody. But ultimately, the amount of I want to say celebrity that Mangione received on the other side of that once he was eventually named by police officers as the person taken into custody is also interesting. How do you think that's going to play out in this case if it does ultimately go to trial? The jury knows this case likely through and through. It'll be tough, I can imagine, to find folks who can be impartial just based off of the large-scale media attention the story has been given.
Certainly makes it a lot more difficult. The more that people are out there hearing about it, the more opinions that are being formulated. if I'm the government or the U.S. government, or if I'm New York State, what I'm doing is I'm leaning into that popularity, and I'm saying, look, this is the entire reason why we upped the charges. This is the entire reason why we wanted the most severe penalty. It's because Mr. Mangione incited violence and was trying to have a popular uprising against the insurance industry. This shows that we're right. This is a case in point that his popularity, that this widespread, this groundswell of support that he has, this shows this was his target all along and his goal all along. People who are espousing support for him, people who are espousing support for violence against this industry and these professionals. That's exactly why we're concerned about that. On the defense side, obviously, you're worried about a fair trial. In Manhattan, you've obviously got a very, very, very large jury pool. You were able to seat a jury last year for the most recognizable human on the planet, Donald Trump. You cycled through probably thousands of people to try to find people who don't have an opinion on it, and ultimately you found them. Tragically, in the United States in the year 2025, not everybody's watching LiveNOW from Fox. Not everybody's reading the newspaper. A lot of people are plugged into podcasts about dogs and cats and things like that. And those are the types of people you're going to need on this panel if you want to find people who already haven't formulated an opinion.
And hopefully they are enjoying those dogs and cats when they're needing to step away or not pay so much attention to everything that's in the media sphere right now. All right, so we do want to continue on. You mentioned something very important a bit earlier in our conversation as it pertains to the Trump administration. When I put up this live look that we also have there of the White House. So like you said, Attorney General Pam Bondi, she's now been in this position for a very short period of time. And it seemed like one of the first things on her docket was to bring the potential to seek the death penalty in this case. So ultimately, we do know that Mangione's defense team asked a federal judge to throw out that possibility before the indictment. But in that fiery back and forth through some of these court filings, prosecutors said it was too early for the defense to move to have that death penalty taken off the table. So what is the route that likely his defense team will ultimately take? Is it certain documents that need to be submitted so that way they could potentially have this removed, saying that if Mangione is convicted, he won't be put to death?
But when you have a brand new indictment, you've got a judge who really hasn't been exposed to any types of facts. And that's ultimately what drives these things and these decisions. So really, it is far too early for this to be eliminated. Basically, the government has made a motion, and obviously, as it should be, when the government wants to take somebody's life for capital punishment, it is a very arduous, it's a very long, it's a very legally difficult process to do something like this. And I think the government, at a minimum, has to have the opportunity to make their case. I think it's going to be hard for them to get all the way there here, but again, the law allows them to make this case. The law allows them to plead like this, and you would think that the defense is going to they're going to do everything possible to cut this off. I equate this sometimes to the horror movie, right? And as a criminal defense lawyer, that's what we do sometimes. We knock over the fruit stand, we knock over the shopping cart, we push everything in front of the monster that we can as the monster's chasing us, but sometimes the monster eats us in the back of a dark alley at the end of the chase. And ultimately, that may be how this ends here. I will say one thing that you really, as a prosecutor, have to be very, very cautious about, and that is overcharging certain cases. And the danger and the downside to seeking the death penalty here is in front of a jury. If a jury thinks that Luigi Mangione could die because of their verdict, then you actually increase the chance that he's acquitted. So anytime a prosecutor is going to go this hard and this aggressively, it can backfire. Ms. Bondi is a career prosecutor. Certainly she knows that, and that's probably something that she factored in. But there is a downside and there is a danger strategically to being this aggressive.
And it is interesting. We have the two men there on our screen, of course, on the right side, the deceased CEO, Brian Thompson, Luigi on the left. Just lastly, before I let you go, Jeremy, again, we now know that his arraignment will be taking place next Friday, April 25th at 1 p.m. What are you expecting to come out of that arraignment? What should we be on the lookout for in this next week?
Not a lot. Arraignments are very perfunctory. They're very formal, and really, what you're sort of doing is checking the box on a lot of the due process rights that the accused has. It is important that you go through these things. It is important that he be allowed to obviously understand the charges against him. Each judge tends to handle arraignments differently, but this is sort of a box checking session, if you will. So I don't think you're going to hear too much. You're not going to hear any type of earth-shattering legal news out of this. At least you shouldn't. But it's part of the process. And like I said, it's pretty extraordinary that the government wants to impose the death penalty here. Again, a very stark departure from the Biden administration. If you remember, President Biden, before he left office, commuted a sentence of, I believe, about 39 death row inmates in federal custody. So obviously another stark reversal from the new administration.
Certainly is, and we're taking that live look there at the White House. Of course, we do know that Luigi Mangione, the accused killer of CEO Brian Thompson, now facing the death penalty in some of these federal charges. It'll be interesting to follow this case, and we certainly appreciate Jeremy Rosenthal, our legal analyst here, for breaking down all the details that have certainly newly came in.
Have a great evening.